Hi friends, Itheria here, and tonight I want to talk about The Little Mermaid, the remake, and of course the old one because it's hard to talk about the remakes without talking about the originals, but I actually really liked the movie enough to want to come here and talk about it, and it's not something I can really talk that much about on my main channel because, you know, my niche is kind of gaming, and the other thing is doing it as ASMR. It gives me the opportunity to be lazy because I don't know if you guys have ever tried video editing, but it can be a lot of work. And I feel like the more I get into it, or the more that I observe other creators, I try to be better myself. So that actually involves more steps because the editing that I do ends up becoming more dynamic. And the funny thing is, I'm still an amateur. I am still extremely beginner level at editing, but regardless, you know, it's something that takes a lot of time. So I actually really enjoy making ASMR videos because I don't put actual videos with them. I just do a audio as you see. So it's kind of like a podcast almost, or an audio blog. And I just get to talk about stuff that I want to talk about, which is genuinely a lot of fun for me. And it's an outlet that I don't necessarily think I have on my main channel. I do to an extent because my main channel is still largely videos that I want to make. I have rarely, if ever, made a video that I didn't want to make. I mean, there were definitely times where it was like, I wanted to do this particular thing, but I didn't want to do it at that moment. So it's like posting every Sunday. There are some weeks that even if you want to do a specific video in general, you may not want to do anything at all that week, you know? Basically I have times where I get lazy, but don't we all? But yeah, I really just love making ASMR videos like this because they're just so casual and laid back and a breath of fresh air. It's not an ordeal to make these, I guess. And sometimes it's nice to have something easy like this, kind of low effort. So anyways, The Little Mermaid Remake. I don't really even know where to start. I think I'll start with the hate. So it's very common for the Disney remakes to get a lot of hate. I'm not sure, it's like every remake they've done except for maybe the first one, which some people would probably say was Maleficent, but it might have been Cinderella. I really don't remember. But I feel like most of them, they just get so much hate. People are constantly saying Disney is no longer creative. They pick on basically every aspect of the movie and say that the original was better, but I have a different take on that. For me, why do you want to see a book or even a comic book turned into a live-action film? There are actually a lot of webtoons like manga and webcomics that get turned into live actions because they get turned into Korean dramas. Basically Korean romance dramas. And then this is not live action, but you see a lot of manga get turned into anime. And the question is, why do we want to see that? And I think the answer is really obvious. When we read a book, or even when we watch an animated film, what we're seeing is not real and still requires some amount of imagination. I think with animated films, obviously there's a little bit less of that there because you get the visuals already, but if you were to try to imagine what Ariel would look like in real life, you might have trouble conjuring up a picture of a real flesh and blood woman with blazing red hair and blue eyes. What would the shape of her nose be? Would her lips be full? Would she be wearing red lipstick all the time? She's only 16. Would she actually, do that kind of makeup? how would she dress? There's so many questions, right? And for some people, they have the imagination to do that, and it's something they enjoy doing. They enjoy imagining these figures in their head. But for other people, maybe not as much, and they want to see that come to life in a different way. And I'm honestly, I don't know, I feel like I can do a little bit of both depending, but I always have that curiosity of like, what would this look like as a live action? So for me, I actually enjoy the live action remakes because if I wanted to watch the original, I would watch the original, you know? If you don't want to watch the live action, if you're not interested in that, then don't. But a lot of people are, and I'm one of them, and I don't know, I guess it's trendy to hate these films, and I just don't think they deserve it. The only one that does deserve it, that I've seen anyway, is Mulan, but I cannot talk any longer about that, or this video will be a Mulan 2020 rant. Yep, came out in 2020. It was a bad year for a lot of people, and it was a bad year for Disney remakes. That is the worst movie. It's an atrocity. Wait, I said I wouldn't go there. Alright, so back to The Little Mermaid, and just Disney movies in general. So yeah, I don't think the remakes are necessarily bad, but you know, it's definitely hard to live up to the originals because the music, the voice acting, the specific actors that they chose to voice act and to sing are often very iconic, and for a lot of us they are part of our childhood, so I think it's fair to say that we can expect that live action won't necessarily live up to that, or that we have like a previous bias for the original animated films because they struck a chord in our heart, or they remind us of a specific time in our life, so there's nostalgia, there's bias. It's kind of like how parents or boomers or even older folk will say stuff like music was better when they were young. You hear that type of thing all the time, don't you? So I think it's kind of like that. But I wonder if you were to ask a child who had never seen the original, have them watch a remake and then have them watch an original, or like the animated version, and I really wonder what they would say. I think some of them maybe would prefer the animation, but other ones might actually be more attached to the remake, especially if, say, they watched the remake when they were young, it was the only one they saw, grew up a little bit, were curious, and watched the original animated film. What would they say? I really think that a lot of them, because the remake would have been their first experience, perhaps they would choose that film over the original. They might feel that the original was even dated. And I actually think that's true for The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid is a pinch dated. It's not atrociously dated at all. And some of the things that they did in the live-action remake were unnecessary, but overall, I also think they made some major improvements to the story. So let's just talk about that. And if you guys haven't figured it out by now, there are of course going to be spoilers in this video. Spoilers how? Well, even though the remake is quite faithful to the original, they still did make some pretty big changes, and I will be talking about some of those because some of them are the reason that I really liked this film. So, with that said, I hope you still want to listen to this ASMR where I talk about the remake. So, what did I like so much and what did I maybe dislike? I think I'll start with what I disliked because what I liked outweighs that. So kind of starting small and then getting big. I don't know, starting with the unimportant. So some of the things I disliked about the film were there were a few moments where it was modernized, or as lots of people might say, woke or wokenized, that I felt maybe didn't need to be. So for example, in Kiss the Girl, the song, they changed one of the lyrics to say, "Use your words, boy, and ask her." And I don't necessarily have a problem with this. I'm kind of neutral about it, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because during that scene, the whole time they're telling him to kiss her, like they're literally like ordering him to do it. At least, okay, this is kind of some English major tangents, but when you have a sentence and it says, kiss the girl, that is technically like a command type statement. You're telling someone to do something. It's not an ask. It's not like a maybe. It's like, do this thing. And that's what they're doing like throughout the whole song. And it's like they changed that one line, but then all of the rest of the lines are the same. So to me, like, just changing that one line didn't really do much. And I didn't think the song was that bad to begin with. Like, it wasn't really... okay, they also changed part of Poor Unfortunate Souls, which I'll get to, and that one is definitely worse. And I can kind of understand why they changed it, although again, having watched the film as a child and being a millennial, I don't think it was bad enough to change, but alas. So anyways, knowing that the other stuff has been worse and that the song in general isn't bad, and then on top of that, Eric never asks if he can kiss her. Like, the song literally says, use your words, boy, and ask her. Ask for consent, which is very important. That's why I'm kind of neutral about it, because I think it is a good lesson to teach children. Like, consent is a really good lesson. But then he doesn't actually ever ask for consent at any point in the movie. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, you can tell they're very much in love, and like, in real life too. You have a significant other. You don't ask them every single time, or maybe even when you're still dating. You guys are probably adults, most of the people watching. There's a mood, right? You can often read the mood and tell if it's okay to kiss someone. But some rules in case anybody listening is young. If you sincerely don't know if someone is okay with you kissing them, then yeah, ask. It's not necessarily a mood killer to ask someone if you can kiss them. And if they say no, it might be maybe a little bit embarrassing for you, but it doesn't have to be. And you can communicate like over why they rejected you. You don't have to always assume that they don't like you at all, because that's not always the case. Of course, it may be the case that they aren't interested in you. And you gotta work on reading the signals and stuff. Or straight up ask them how they feel about you if you don't know. I think communication is one of the strongest things that we have as human beings to prevent misunderstandings and to prevent ourselves from putting others in uncomfortable situations or landing in them ourselves. Being honest and communicating about what we want and don't want. But sometimes people are nervous. I'll tell you a little secret. My first boyfriend, it actually took me, I don't even want to say it. It took me a few months to kiss him because I was incredibly shy. You guys can't imagine how shy I was, and I feel bad for the guy. I'm amazed that he didn't dump me, but he didn't, and I did eventually kiss him. But so there are some situations in which people will say no because they're just not ready yet. And obviously we need to respect that. But the thing about the movie is they tell him to ask her if he can kiss her, but then he never does. Instead, he asks her if she wants to try rowing the boat with him because she seems interested, because obviously Ariel's very curious about the world, the human world. So it's just kind of weird to me. I felt like it didn't mesh into the story very well. I think the problem with the remake at some points, the changes that they make at some points take you out of the immersion. That happened to me a few times with some of the changes that they made, and that was one of them. Because they're like, use your words, boy, and ask her, and they're talking about consent, but he never asks to kiss her. And throughout that song, Kiss the Girl, they're telling him, kiss her, and he moves in slowly, and she turns her head away. Okay, fine, she didn't want to kiss. But then at the end, the mood is even better, and they go in for the kiss, and just like in the original, the eels flip the boat. So at that point, she was probably going to kiss him back. But at no point is there any, it's just him making googly eyes at her, and trying to read the mood and seeing if she's okay with the kiss, and yeah. And obviously, like I said, sometimes consent is moving in slowly and the other person tilts their head up, and you can tell that they want to kiss you too, but I don't know. I just felt, like I said, like it took me out of the immersion a bit. So I was talking about Poor Unfortunate Souls as well, for something that they changed. Now let me say, I really liked the actress they chose for Ursula. I think she did her best with that role, and I think she did a pretty good job, considering the original Ursula is of course iconic. So I didn't mind her Ursula at all. and I didn't think that it was like there are some moments where I'm like, man, this really doesn't get close to the original. Like Under the Sea, I think, was the one where I was like, man, this just isn't quite. I liked Sebastian's actor. Frankly, I did like all of the actors, but I did feel that Sebastian's voice actor, and especially for the singing of like Under the Sea, it just didn't give me the same energy as the original. Where Ursula, I actually felt did have pretty close energy to the original. Obviously, she did voice some lines differently and did her own take on it, but I still felt really like she put 150% into playing that character, and it shows. So I don't know, I feel like she should be proud of herself and really proud of the job that she did in portraying this iconic character. It's always so hard to step into those shoes of characters that are this, iconic. But anyways, in the song, there's a part where they kind of stop singing and they have like a little talking moment before going back to singing. And Ariel says, but without my voice, how can I bond with Eric or whatever? I don't remember the whole thing, and Ursula might have cut her off, but she says, without my voice. And Ursula starts to sing. She says, you have your looks, your pretty face, and don't forget the importance of body language. The men up there don't like a lot of blabber. And she basically goes on continuing and implies that men don't like women who talk a lot, which means they would hate me. Do you guys hate me? Do you guys hate me? Because I talk a ton. Like, I'm already 20 minutes in and I've been on tangents. I have been on tangents. I can already tell that I'm going to hate myself later when I have to edit this because it's going to be 50 plus minutes long, but I digress. I'm going to have to edit it down. It's, sometimes I have to cut things because you guys are probably like, what? You said you recorded for 50 minutes, but we're saying 30. That's because, I gotta edit certain things out. The dog moves, my brother gets up and poops. Just kidding, not poops, coughs. Okay, anyway, back to the song. So she is basically implying that men don't like women who talk a lot, and that Ariel should seduce Eric with her body. And it's kind of very, a very objectifying statement. He will like you for your looks and for your body. He'll be glad that you don't speak. You are the perfect kind of arm candy, right? So they removed that from the remake, and I do understand why, because it's not necessarily a good message to send to kids that women are just like trophies, or, that it's better for them to be quiet. But that's the thing. The reason I feel like it maybe wasn't necessary, even though I can kind of see why they did it, is because, Ursula is a villain, and we can't necessarily trust what Ursula says, right? We already know that she has a bad motivation for what she's doing, and that she doesn't want Ariel to succeed, and that she's not on Ariel's side, and that actually she knows that if Ariel had her voice, things would go better for her and Eric and be a lot easier for them to bond and share true love's kiss. So even though those statements that Ursula made are unfortunately to some extent true in terms of there are people in this world that agree with what Ursula said, and it's very sad that those people think that way, but I personally don't necessarily think it's a harmful thing to have in the movie, and I think it was a funny moment. That was actually one of my favorite parts of the movie and the song, because it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's not quite gritty, but it is definitely a little more mature. I think it makes it more fun for older audiences, and I don't know, like I said, it is almost kind of funny in a way, humorous, what she says. So definitely mixed feelings about that one, and obviously having grown up watching all these movies, I didn't grow up believing what Ursula said. And like I said, she's the villain, so why would we believe her? And I also feel like, Eric and Ariel prove those things wrong, because sure, Eric does fall for Ariel, even though she can't speak. But after she gets her voice back, he's not like, damn, she can speak now. He's like, oh my god, I knew it was you. You really are the woman with the beautiful voice that saved my life. We were fated to be, because I fell in love with you even when you didn't have your voice. So yeah, I don't know, I just don't think that they had to take it out, but I guess I get why they did. And then after that, there were a couple other moments that kind of took me out of the immersion, but they were minor, so I think I'm just gonna move on. a little bit. I would say the Ursula thing didn't really ruin my immersion because they just cut it out, so you didn't really notice. I mean, of course I noticed because I'm talking about it, but it wasn't like glaring in your face like we're missing something. But I will say in that scene, because they cut that part out, there was one part that really broke my immersion, which was Ariel, instead of like asking about her voice and stuff, she basically says that she's not sure if she wants to accept Ursula's deal. And Ursula says to her something like, "I'm offering you the prime package, kid," and I just didn't like that line at all. That broke my immersion. I just didn't think it belonged there. And then she follows up with "Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?" which is in the original. So I wish they wouldn't have said that at all. Like, I wish it would have just been Ariel being like, I don't know, I'm not sure about this deal. And then Ursula being like, "Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?" You know, because I feel like that alone would have made sense. But yeah, those were kind of the things, the few minor things that I didn't love about the movie. It's just that there's a few moments throughout the movie that do kind of break the immersion. And I do think that, like, musically, you're gonna notice that the songs don't sound the same as the original. And I still feel like Ursula did a great job with Poor Unfortunate Souls. Under the Sea was Ariel's songs were really good though. I think Halle Bailey was the perfect casting for this. She has the perfect voice, the perfect demeanor, like the perfect kind of innocent face. Like, I don't know, I just think she was an amazing Ariel. Okay, so I can't believe that I forgot to talk about this in my original recording, but as I'm editing, I realized I didn't, so I just wanted to pop in and discuss this too. But I wanted to discuss what happens at the end of the movie when they kind of battle Ursula. So in the original, Eric gets on a ship, well, a wrecked ship that is dredged up by Ursula's whirlpool, and he turns the prow, the wheel thing, so that it stabs Ursula, and that is how they defeat her. But in the Disney remake, they decided to have Ariel do that. And I have very mixed feelings about this, but I ultimately think I don't like it. So the reason I have mixed feelings is that I do feel to some extent it is illustrating that Ariel, the black sheep, that her knowledge that she's gained by being a black sheep and by being interested in these things that she's not supposed to be, has caused her to be able to save the day. Like, if she never observed humans the way that she did, then she would not have been able, like, she wouldn't have had the knowledge of how to steer the ship. However, the problem I have with this is, I guess, a couple things. First of all, it was kind of important that Eric be the one to save the day because King Triton doesn't trust him, and so by Eric being, I guess, valiant, it shows that he wanted to save Ariel. He didn't try to save his own neck and just leave. He was there the whole time and made the killing blow. So I feel like that action kind of helps gain him some trust and respect in King Triton's eyes, which I felt was important. But the other thing is, in this movie, obviously Eric doesn't leave or try to save himself. He does try to help Ariel, but the only thing he does is like throw a harpoon at Ursula and scratches like her arm when Ursula has the trident at Ariel's throat, and that's it. So he kind of saves Ariel there, but that's it. Otherwise, he does absolutely nothing during that like entire scene except like try not to drown. That's all he does. He flails around in the water and tries not to drown. I think that if Disney wanted to give this a more feminist take, because I sincerely think that's why they made Ariel the one to do it and not Eric, there's a whole thing in this movie where, and I like this, that Ariel is not a damsel in distress anymore. In the original movie, she's very much a damsel in distress pretty much the whole time, where in this movie she's a lot more independent and has a lot more autonomy and isn't just relying on other people the entire time. So I did like that they changed that and give her a little bit more courage and strength. Not that she wasn't necessarily brave in the original movie. I think it takes a lot of bravery to like leave your hometown in general for something new and unknown. But I just remember I rewatched the original film after seeing the remake, and I remember thinking kind of the whole time Ariel was a damsel in distress because in the original movie she couldn't even swim after getting her legs, which I do think makes sense. Like, obviously she lived as a mermaid and she never would have had legs, but in the remake, they make it so that she actually can swim on her own. She's not necessarily like a pro swimmer or anything, but she's not also like going to drown, I guess. Where in the original film, she like absolutely can't swim at all and would absolutely drown. Like when they fall over in the lagoon, the eels push the little rowboat over, Eric has to hold her up. Where in this movie, like the remake, she's fine. So I do like that change. However, I do feel that at the end scene with Ursula, that was just kind of like a woke thing. Like I feel like it was them trying to be feminist and all that. And I think the thing with feminism that gets lost in these kinds of movies, feminism is about equality. Feminism isn't about women being uncharacteristically strong, like what happened in Mulan. Gross. It's also not about being better than men, like what happened in Mulan. Gross. It's about equality. So even though Ariel could have been the one to turn the boat and Eric, because they kind of reversed their roles, like Eric became the bait and Ariel became the valiant soldier. And I wish what they would have done was had both of them turn the wheel. I think it would have been cool if they both end up on the same like shipwreck ship, and that's how they defeat Ursula together. Maybe because the ship was underwater for such a long time, it was crusted in barnacles and things and hard to turn, and it took the strength of both of them to turn it. I think that would have been a really nice ending, and maybe instead of having Eric or Ariel be the bait, the distraction, they could have brought in like Scuttle or some of the other like minor characters to like, I don't know, fly around and try to like poke her in the eyes or something. Because obviously if they were in the ship, maybe she would have just moved away if she wasn't distracted by trying to attack specifically one of them, as she is in both the original and remake. But yeah, I still felt that taking it away from Eric just took away from his character in general and made him seem kind of like useless. Like, why was he even there? I guess he was the bait. Yeah, I just kind of felt like, why is he there? He's flailing around, he's like helpless. He was the damsel in distress. And I guess there's nothing wrong with having a male character come across as like wimpy, and he doesn't really come across as wimpy in general. But I don't know, I just didn't like that scene. That one just wasn't something that I thought was a necessarily good change. And like I said, I personally really wish that they both together would have turned the wheel of the ship and together found a way to defeat Ursula rather than Eric flailing around, trying not to drown, trying not to get killed by Ursula, and Ariel finally figuring out what to do. I think another thing they could have done is like they made other changes to the movie, so like they could have changed that scene as a whole. They didn't have to do the whirlpool thing, or if they did, like I said, they could have found something else to do that played to both of the characters' strengths, and they didn't. Instead, they did this woke thing, like, oh, let's have Ariel be the one. And yeah, it was fine. It just wasn't the best. So that's my little tidbit that I had to add. So I guess now let me talk about the things that I liked, the changes that I really enjoyed that they made. So going back to Poor Unfortunate Souls, that whole scene, Ariel goes to Ursula, and Ursula offers to make her human in exchange for her voice. And they make the deal that if Ariel is unsuccessful, she will turn back into a mermaid and belong to Ursula. She'll become Ursula's property. What I like about the remake in general is that Ariel is not so naive. I think they must have aged the characters up a bit too. They don't ever say how old Ariel's supposed to be in the remake, but I feel like she's probably around 18, just because she still has that kind of youthful innocence to her. But she's not a child anymore. Do you get what I'm saying? Because I feel like around 18, maybe even 19, you're still a bit immature, but you're not a child anymore either. Obviously, it depends on your upbringing. There are some 18-year-olds who have had to fend for themselves for a while, and they tend to be more mature, but I think you guys get what I'm saying, is that a lot of 18-year-olds are still quite young, but not quite young as 16. So the Ariel in the remake is a little bit less stupid. I don't want to say stupid. The Ariel in the remake is definitely a little bit less naive. She takes a little bit more time, I guess, to think about Ursula's offer. and she was going to walk away from it completely. And I do think in the original, Ariel hesitates, but not as much. In the remake, she hesitates a lot more and seems like she's going to turn down the offer. But then Ursula reminds her that if she turns it down, she will never get to leave the ocean. And the cool thing about Ariel in the remake is that she's not just about Eric. So in the original movie, that's all it is. Obviously, Ariel's curious about the human world, but in the original movie, largely the reason that she wants to become human is Eric. From the moment she sees him, she is immediately in love with him. They've never had a conversation. The original movie, frankly, is shallow, as many of these fairy tale first love romances, or love at first sight romances are. They are incredibly shallow because basically Ariel sees Eric, thinks he's incredibly handsome. Eric sees Ariel, thinks she's beautiful, and of course, she does save his life, but he doesn't realize that it's her when she's on land, right? And so it's basically like they both just think the other is attractive, and that's love at first sight. Like, that's kind of all it boils down to in the original. We get a very short montage of them doing stuff around the town, but like, you never really see them have any actual, like, depth to the connection between them. It's just like, oh, we love each other, we're made for each other. There's nothing more. You don't know if they have anything in common at all, other than that they both think the other person is good looking. That's all we know. So yeah, the original movie is definitely very, 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 very shallow in the love story and in Ariel's motivations. The remake, they gave her more motivations. Her motivation in the remake is largely autonomy. She has long wanted to explore the human world, or at the very least, learn about it. But nobody allows her to do so much as pick up a book. She gets in trouble, well, I don't know if they can actually read down there, but she gets in trouble just for going to shipwrecks and finding items that belonged to humans. So she can't be herself, and she can't study the things that she's interested in. Maybe Ariel never would have went to the surface or would have been less intrigued by it if she could have learned more about it where she was at, although for lots of people, seeing a place and going to a place are far different, so maybe she still would have wanted to go. But I feel like she wouldn't have felt depraved, I guess you could say, because she felt incredibly alone. Nobody understood her, and she was constantly getting in trouble just for being interested in something. Just for being herself, she would be getting in trouble and be at odds with her father. So you see in this movie, they really play into that in the remake. And her desire isn't just to see Eric. Obviously, that's definitely part of it. They haven't removed that. This is still a romance. This is still a fairy tale. They still fall in love in 3 days, or, well, kind of still at first sight. But she's less obsessed with him. She doesn't say the line, "But Daddy, I love him." She does not say that, and I actually was kind of glad about it because I feel like as an adult, I just look at that and I'm like, you kind of see that and you're like, it's just a dude. Like, you know, like she's all worked up over this guy she's never had a conversation with. So to me, it does feel very immature. So even though the Ariel in the remake also does still have that kind of like naivety and innocence to her, it's not to the point where it's almost annoying or like makes you kind of, you know, roll your eyes at the character. She just genuinely wants to make her own decisions and be allowed to be interested in the things that she's interested in, and nobody understands. Nobody lets her do that. Nobody lets her just be herself. So her desire to go to the surface and to go on land is fueled by much more than just a man. And that's how Ursula convinces her to take the deal, even though she decided that it was a bad idea. The moment Ursula says, well, you're never going to get to leave here and be yourself, and you're just, you know, going to be miserable here because you can't, you know, be who you are. Ariel's like, you know what? Screw it. And she goes through with Ursula's deal, right? So that was one thing that I absolutely adored about the remake, was that they really developed Ariel a little bit further and made her less of just like a, you know, silly 16-year-old thinking she's in love with someone, and turned her into someone who, of course, was very interested in the handsome man. But the other thing is, and this is the next thing that I really liked about this movie, the reason that Ariel was so intrigued by Eric was because they're kindred spirits. So when she goes to spy on their ship, the first time she sees their ship, and this happens in the original as well, she, swims up to the ship and spies on them. Eric has a conversation with his, aide, or I don't know if it's a butler or Grimsby is his name. I don't know what his official title is, but we'll just call him, the aide. And Grimsby says that Eric needs to act like a prince and to stop going on, pointless adventures and things like that. And to act his station because Eric is, having a good time with the sailors who are under him, right? They're peasants. Eric is a prince. But Eric talks about how he doesn't want that for himself and how he was actually adopted. So he's not a prince by blood, he's a prince by adoption. So he talks about how he doesn't want that for himself, having to be in this box that he feels the royalty is trying to put him in, where he treats himself as above these other people, and where he talks about how his father never left the kingdom, and he talks about how he wants to open up his country to trade so that they don't get left behind by a constantly changing and innovating world, constantly progressing world. And so Ariel overhears some of this, and because some of this conversation I think was a little bit later, but she does overhear enough to see him as a kindred spirit, because immediately she relates to him, because he essentially is complaining about being forced into this box that just isn't him, and it isn't who he wants to be, and he wants to make his own choices. He doesn't want to live the way his father did. He doesn't want to live the way that his mother wants him to live. He doesn't want to be the kind of prince he feels that people are trying to pressure him or force him to be. He wants to be a prince in his own way. And he says, what I want to do is, do this in my own way and try to make our country better in my own way by doing these things, by going on these voyages and trading with other countries to cultures. So yeah, it's really cool because Ariel already kind of sees a kindred spirit in him before she has a real conversation with him. So in the original movie, she literally just looks at him, thinks he's hot. But in this movie, not only is he handsome, but she is like, wow, this guy is going through something very similar to me. He might understand me. And so I really, really enjoyed that because it wasn't so shallow, it wasn't so shallow. And then continuing with the romance. In the original movie, there's essentially a montage of them going around the town. And they do the same thing in the remake, except they expanded a lot more. So they still do have a little bit of a montage. It's a little bit longer, but they have a scene before that where she finds Eric's little treasure room. It's full of all these different things that he has found on his voyage. And even though she can't talk, they start to bond there because he sees that she's interested in his collection, something that nobody else is interested in. He said that nobody has gone in that room for a long time because no one else is interested in his voyages and they don't think he should even be doing them. So he immediately sees that she's curious about it and starts opening up to her about himself a little bit. And they end up bonding that way, and there's that scene where first he talks to her about some of the things he got on his voyages, and then it cuts to them at night, and they're poring over maps, and he's showing her the world via the maps, and it's really, really cute and endearing. And of course, he ends up asking her if she would like to see the town. And of course, she agrees, and that's where we get the kind of montage scene. It is a little bit less of a montage in the remake because they spend a little bit more time on the cute little moments that they have. She ends up taking a hat and putting it on him, and he doesn't want to lose it, and it was really sweet. And so I'm also enjoying the love, not just the fact that they have something in common, like the reason that Ariel was interested in him, but also that in the movie, they have a lot more scenes where they actually bond, they actually have conversations, whereas in the original, weirdly enough, the conversations they have are very minimal. I mean, obviously Ariel can't talk, but still, in this version, even though she can't talk, they're still communicating, right? They're still having conversations because, she's pointing to things she wants to learn more about and he's telling her, and At one point, she honestly even cuts him off, which I thought was kind of rude. But, you know, that's part of it, right? That's part of getting to know people. Her curiosity is so insatiable that as he's about to go on some tangents, she like plops down another map and he's like, oh, okay, another one. But he's also endeared by her curiosity and excited to be able to finally share with someone the things that he's interested in. So I love the way they changed up the love story in this one, because not only does she have a reason to like him from the get-go because she overheard him on the ship, but then also once they actually get together in person and she has legs, they have so many more like interactions that make it feel like, you know, they really are falling for each other or that they're perfect for each other or whatever. Because I'm serious, in the original, they literally don't have, like, any conversation. Like, they dance, she drives the little carriage thing, and, like, then they're on the boat. And this one obviously does the same thing. She drives the carriage, they dance. But there's just something about the scenes that seem, I don't know, they just seem more deep than the original one. And this movie did something that I think is, like, way better than the original, which is Ariel's name. Eric shows her constellations in the night sky while they're in the little rowboat on the lagoon right before, well, actually during the Kiss the Girl song, I believe it was. It's kind of like in the middle, like the song cuts for a little and then they have like a little talk and then the song goes back. And this is my favorite moment in the movie. He is saying to her, I don't know what your name is. Maybe I should guess. And this is after he was showing her some of the constellations in the sky. And he starts guessing like he does in the original. And she's like, no. And it's not, in the original, it's Sebastian that whispers in his ear what her name is. But in this movie, she points to the constellation of Aries. And he looks and he says, Aries. And then she stops him by putting her finger on his lips. And he's like, Airy. And then she draws her finger down. And he understands, eventually, after a couple tries, Ariel. It was such a cute, like, fluff, like, wholesome, fan service, heart-fluttering type of, maybe not fan service, I feel like fan service usually talks about, like, abdominals or, like, nudity or, like, falling into someone's tits, but that's not what I meant. I guess, see, look, fan service to me is the heart-fluttering stuff. But no, it was, like, literally the cutest thing I've seen in a while. It was so adorable and I loved it so much and it was so wholesome and cute. And like I said, it makes your heart flutter. It was just such a wonderful moment in this movie. And I loved that she was the one to tell him her name instead of Sebastian. And it was just such a clever thing to point at the stars. The first part of her name is Airy from Aries and then the L. So, it was just so special. So yeah, I think the reason that I like this movie so much as a remake, despite all of the negativity around remakes in general, was that they just did a really great job deepening the love story. Like, it felt like more of an enjoyable romance film than the original did, because the original really was just so shallow. And I know that that was kind of part of the time, was those fairy tales where it's like love at first sight and there's not a lot of depth to it. But I like the added depth quite a bit. I almost do wish they would have done more, though, with the romance. And what I mean by that is, we still get just kind of the one scene where you have, like, the scene where he's showing her the maps, and then the scene of them going through the town, and finally having the kiss the girl moment on the lagoon. So, it's not a very, like, large portion of the film. I don't remember exactly how long it took to get to the point where she was even on land, but I think it was like more, like maybe like 40-ish, 45, somewhere in there, before she's like even on land. And then they have like a couple scenes before like finally they're kind of going on little dates, if you will, or going on, you know, like actually interacting. And I guess I wish that there was like, I wish they would have added more. Like, I wish they wouldn't have just done the scenes that were in the original montage of them going through this city and dancing and whatnot. I almost wish they would have added more scenes, because I feel like, you know, both in the original and in the remake as like a romance film, there are so many scenes that have like nothing to do with that, you know. And obviously you have to set up the background of her being in the ocean and Ursula being evil and her wanting to come above land or above water. But I don't know. I think it would have been cool. I don't know how they would have done it though, because the movie is like 2 hours long and the original is 90 minutes, I think. So they already added more, which is weird because it doesn't feel like they had more, because they did cut out some of the chaff, like the Les Poissons song. But yeah, I really don't know, but I really liked it. And one last thing before I kind of wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about the music. I know I touched on the music a few times already, but specifically, they did add a song for Eric, and I actually did really like it. I thought Eric's voice actor / singer had a really, really nice singing voice, so I really enjoyed it. And they also added another reprise to Part of Your World. So in the original film, you have Part of Your World, and then after she saves Eric and they're on the shore together, she starts singing again. That's the first reprise to Part of Your World. And they added a second one, and it actually made me remember another thing I wanted to mention that I liked about the film, which is that Ariel actually is a little bit retrospective in this film. There's a couple moments in the film where she takes a moment to question her decisions, where she realizes that she threw away everything to come and be on land. She took a huge risk for this. And so there are some moments where she almost seems to question if she really made the right decision or not. And I just like that sort of retrospectiveness because I think it shows growth in a person when you can be that way. And it just makes her feel a little bit more mature, which, like I said, I think her immaturity was a little bit of a problem in the first film. Obviously, she was 16, so it makes sense. But just again, as an older viewer, I personally appreciate that Ariel is like, man, I don't know if I should have done this or not. And even though things work out for Ariel in the end, and we all know that, she still acknowledges that, like, obviously things weren't working out for her in terms of people not understanding her and her father especially, but she still kind of understands that maybe there could have been a different route. Maybe they could have talked things out, because she gave up everything and she does still love her family. So I just like that because I feel like her being a little bit introspective about it, again, just shows a little bit of maturity. Okay, so back to the second reprise. It is so beautiful. I absolutely love it. And the reprise is a moment where she's introspective. So the second reprise, they have it right after she sees Eric is to be engaged. In this movie, they don't have him get married. They have him be engaged to Vanessa, which is Ursula in disguise. And she sings the most beautiful reprise as she's all sad about it. And actually, I will sing it for you right now. Risking it all, only to fall back where I started. Back near the shore, back to before you took my hand. Betcha on land, they understand. Bet they don't strand you broken hearted. What did I give to live where you are? Where do I go with nowhere to turn to? So that was the song, the second reprise to Part of Your World. What do you guys think? I really, really, really love it. And with that, I'm going to end this little audio blog ASMR of lots of tangents and me saying the same thing over and over again. I know I'm like that. But I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Good night.